What's up, YouTube? And welcome to my pickups video for the month of July 2020. This was actually a pretty good month overall. I still am not doing much of traveling, but I can say that within my home state of Missouri, a lot of the stores have opened back up and did some just day trips and things like that to pick up a lot of games within the state, as well as a lot of things I bought online over the last month. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to look at PlayStation systems first, and then we'll move into some other systems, and actually got some new portable systems this month to show. So some new hardware as well as software to go with the mix. Starting off with PS1 games, I actually did get a few more PS1 games this month. This is a system that I pretty much slowed down on because I have a rather sizable system library for it, but there's still a few holes here and there that I'm realizing I want to fill in. So if you watched my last video, one of the things I called out is, as of the prior month, I didn't have any of the 4 Tony Hawk Pro Skater games on the system, and now with the re-release coming out of 1 and 2, kind of want to go back and play those on the system they were intended for. So I have now, the last video I got part 1 and 3, now I've picked up part 2. Nice clean original print copy of this. One thing I think is interesting to note about the original release of this one has Spider-Man included as a hidden character. Because Activision had the Marvel license at the time. I would be willing to bet that the reissue, they will not be able to secure the rights to include Spider-Man in that game. So I still think that having these on the original hardware, whether you have this on PS1, Dreamcast, N64, whatever, does give you some advantages. So one nice thing with this, and really enjoying this game, playing it all over again from scratch. Primarily I had played this one on the Dreamcast before, but interesting to play this on the PS1, which it was natively intended for when it originally came out. So happy to have that one in my PS1 collection. And then the other one I grabbed more recently is Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4. I would not expect too much from this one. This one was really moved on to the next generation of consoles and was kind of a consolation prize for the PS1. I do think that this one, just like Part 3, would probably have quite a few limitations on the PS1 hardware that is not present on some of the other consoles this one was released for. But nice to have the set of these. I do think that, you know, if you really go back and look at the legacy of the PS1, these games were pretty important for the time and innovative, and also really just kind of carved out a new niche of games that people still play today. So very happy to have both of those. Another one I grabbed is Diehard Trilogy-Viva Las Vegas. This is not a game that would typically interest me, but one thing that this game does have the feature is this one does support light guns, and it supports the GunCon as well as the PS1 mouse. So I really just wanted to go through and experiment with some of the extra peripherals that this game supports. And not expecting too much. I haven't dug into it yet, but happy to have just another game that is compatible with the light guns as well as the mouse. This one I also just recently got. This is Robo Pit. This one is kind of an obscure release that came out early in the jewel cases of the system, and I'm starting to see it spike in price. So I would say if you start to just see this game out in the wild for a few bucks, it's definitely worth grabbing. I'm not saying it's going to be a next super expensive game, but I do think it'll hold its value pretty well. I did have this on the Saturn already as part of my Saturn collection, so I've played it a little bit there, and I went back and played the PS1 version. It's a pretty simplistic robot fighting game, but you do have a lot of customization options and things you can do to your little cartoonish robots in this game, and I guess pretty innovative as far as the level of customization it had for the era. There also is a sequel to this on the PS1, and it's much more common, although it's still kind of obscure. It was a budget release that came out much later in the system life, so you can find those even sealed copies pretty easily, but just happy to have another weird PS1 release that I thought I already owned, but apparently I didn't. And then the last thing I got for the PS1, this one was kind of a disappointment. I don't really know what I'm going to do with this at this point, but this is Dragon Beat: The Legend of Pinball. This is a Japanese exclusive release. It's got dragons, it's got hip-hop, it's got pinball. I mean, really, how can you go wrong with those three things? But this one actually doesn't work. I waited over a month to get this game in from a seller from Europe. They were very understanding and actually refunded my purchase without me having to send it back. I actually went to one of my local stores and had the disc resurfaced, hoping that that would bring it back. The scratches on it really weren't that bad, but ultimately it just gets to the title screen and hangs even on proper Japanese hardware. So unfortunately, this game does not work. I'm going to hang on to the case and manual and spine card in case I find like another copy, just with the disc later on. But this is a pretty obscure pinball, even for the Japanese system, that I would be very much interested in playing. I watched some videos of it, and it looked pretty cool. So very sad that this game does not work, but I'll hang on to the case and everything at least. That is all the PS1 stuff. We'll look at PS2 stuff next. If you have not checked out my most recent video, I posted a collection video of all 150-ish PS2 games I have for the US system. I also have a very large Japanese PS2 library. I've made a video on that in the years past. Since that video's been made, I added a pretty healthy stack of PS2 games. So I think just digging those games out on the shelf, talking about them a little bit, I looked at some holes in my collection and also some things that I realized I wanted to get for the system. So we'll go ahead and get started on these. Really where my focus has been primarily at the beginning of this month was getting the remaining GunCon 2 compatible games on the PS2. So one of those is Dino Stalker by Capcom. And it's kind of like a Dino Crisis side story game that has obvious light gun action, but you still have some adventuring that you do with the D-pad on the GunCon 2. So kind of a neat feature that the GunCon 1 didn't have is that it has that D-pad, and that also allows some games to give you some freedom of exploration in these games beyond just shooting. I think it's okay. It's not really... It didn't hold my interest too much, but I might go back and play it a little bit more. I don't think this game was that popular, and it was kind of interesting that this game is starting to go up on price a little bit on eBay, but I found an Amazon seller that sold me a very nice copy for like $8, so I can't complain at all. But just one more of the GunCon 2 games. Expect to see a video on those from me pretty soon because I'm trying to collect the full set of all the GunCon and GunCon 2 compatible games for the US systems. So the next one of those, also that falls into that bucket, is Time Crisis 2. This was the first of the Time Crisis series to come to the PS2. Not the best of the 3 games that we got, but it is still pretty solid. It is very much based on the arcade game. Pretty wacky story, and a lot of just action-packed light gun shooting. So not a bad release. You can get this one very cheap, and just, you know, another part of that GunCon 2 set that I'm going to go for. The third one of these GunCon 2 games is the one that I was most interested in. I actually played this much more than I thought I would, and that is Resident Evil Dead Aim. This is another side story game that Capcom created, primarily to focus on the light gun hardware, but also this one has the heavier exploration feature using the D-pad. So there's a lot of story in this game. There is a lot of hunting around and walking through the ship that you're marooned on or whatever. A lot of zombies and pretty good action in this. I think that this one could have been fleshed out a little bit more, maybe be considered like a canon part of the series rather than a side story. But overall, since I'm not a huge fan of Resident Evil, I was enjoying this a lot more than I thought I would. So can highly recommend this if you're looking to get into some of the light gun games on the GunCon 2, and you have a CRT TV that's able to play them. So very happy to get this one, and I can also see why that one's probably one of the more popular ones for the PS2 now. Some other PS2 stuff I got this month. This one I really didn't need, but I just was interested in it because I don't see it that often. This is Capcom vs. SNK, the Match of the Millennium Part 2. I do have this on the Sega Dreamcast for the Japanese system. When I bought that one as soon as it came out. Kind of curious how this holds up on the PS2. I think one thing that stands out to me is the GameCube version, and I think even the Xbox version were tagged as EO edition. And what that stood for was easy operation, and they actually dumbed down the gameplay a little bit for those systems. So the PS2 version, I think, is more genuine to the arcade game as well as the Dreamcast release, and this one probably should be pretty solid. I just haven't had a chance to play this yet with some of the other stuff I've been getting in. You can let me know if you played this one, and maybe your thoughts on this, whether I decide to keep it or sell it. One other game I bought for the PS2 that I may not really truly need, but I decided to get it anyway, is Heavenly Guardian. This is a tribute to, I guess, the Pocky and Rocky series. It's kind of like a budget version of that. I think there was original intent to secure that license and it fell through, so they just put in generic characters to take the place of Pocky and Rocky. But it's not as good as those classic Pocky and Rocky series games, but it's still the same general theme. This also came out on the Wii, and I've owned that version since it came out, but because some games on the Wii I just don't really enjoy playing with the controller, I thought this one might be a little more fun with the PS2 controller, so decided to grab it. Haven't dug into this one yet either. I don't know if it's any better or even different than the Wii version, but you can kind of take your choice and get that game on either system if you're interested. Another game I got for the PS2 that kind of completes a little mini subset is Shadow Hearts Covenant. This game had 3 releases on the PS2, and they were from Aruze, or what is the Saknoth, I think is the sub-company of SNK that actually put these together. This is a series that really had a variety of publishers in the US. So you can see this one's covered by or published by Midway. Kind of has this very American-looking cover on it, even though it is a Japanese-looking game, or Japanese-developed game, I should say. But we also had a game in the series put out by Xseed, so I mean it's really inconsistent as far as the artwork approach and the publishers in the series, although they all had the same initial developer in Japan. So looking forward to digging into that. Another one I haven't given time to yet. Another PS2 game I bought that when I made my video on the library I realized I didn't have, and I thought I did. Pretty much got most of the Atlas titles for the system, at least all the unique and different ones, not maybe some of the more like kiddie games that they put out. But this one is Wizardry, what's the subtitle? Tale of the Forsaken Land. And I'm not a huge Wizardry fan. It probably won't be something I get into too much. But I was able to get this one pretty cheap locally and realized that, just kind of filled a hole in my Atlas subset for the PS2. I don't think this one's going to shoot up in value like some of the other Atlas titles are, but, it's still nice to have. One game I've had on the PS2, probably since I got my initial Japanese PS2, which I bought before my US system, is Contra Shattered Soldier, or Shin Contra as it was known in Japan. I really liked that game. I don't think this one got a whole lot of coverage. It may be positive coverage, I should say. But I always thought it was a good 2D style with 3D characters or whatever. Tribute to the classic Contra games, and I decided ultimately I would rather just own the US version of this, so I'm going to sell my Japanese version and just play this one, I think, from now on. We also got a sequel to this in the US, which was Neo Contra. Pretty good as well, but I think I like this one a little bit better. Also, really just like the artwork on it. It's the same artwork as the Japanese version had, so yet another reason I decided I don't need to keep both. And then the last thing I got is kind of sort of a PS2 game, but not quite. You can kind of think of these as like the Color Dreams releases of the PS2. So there were these DVD games that were put out by this company Digital Leisure, and really what they did was they licensed old Laserdisc arcade games. So be it things that were put out by the company that made Dragon's Lair, or maybe some of these other ones by American Laser Games, that this is one of. This is Who Shot Johnny Rock, which we did get a port to like Sega CD and maybe 3DO. But I thought that this would look a little bit better and higher quality video on this DVD release. So really what they did with these is they made them games that play off a DVD, just like a DVD movie, but they happen to support DVD remotes, and it also supports the PS2 D-pad and action button. So really you only need the 4 directions as well as the action button. Most of these are ports of light gun games or like QuickTime event games, so they're pretty simplistic, but they do have that original Laserdisc video brought to a DVD system. So now that I've learned these are out there, there's actually quite a few of them. I think it would be an interesting subset to get all of them. On this disc, there's previews for like 15 releases. I don't think all of them came out, but I'm looking around right now and seeing that there's some other interesting titles that came out this way. So I found this one at a local store. It kind of sparked a lot of research. I did play it. I will say that I wish it had light gun support or even mouse support, but with the D-pad and the PS2 controller, it is playable. There's a little bit of lag in the inputs, as obviously it was intended to be a light gun game. So interesting that these came out. They also work with the Xbox, the original Xbox, if you have the DVD remote, and can play DVDs through that. So weird little titles. These were not licensed by Sony or Microsoft, yet they do have that compatible little bullseye on the cover that lets you know that they do work with them. I did get one new release this month. This is a PS4 title that kind of came out of nowhere in the US after a long delay, and that is Disaster Report 4 Summer Memories. This game launched right in kind of the peak COVID hysteria right in the month of April, and immediately seemed like it sold out everywhere. This game spiked on eBay like overnight, and I didn't want to pay the prices that it was going for on eBay, but I did want to get a copy after watching some videos of this. This game is part of the series that we had kind of a convoluted history of in the US, so the first 2 games in the series came out on the PS2, although they have different titles. The first one was called Disaster Report. The second one, though, was called Raw Danger, and these are originally released by the remainder of the company Irem, and then a company that came out of the ashes of Irem called Granzella. And ultimately, these are disaster events that you have to play as a character and navigate the aftermath of the disaster. So this one is like the first one in that it's based on earthquakes. The second one was based on tsunamis. There is a third game in the series that only came out on the PSP, and I haven't played that one or only came out on PSP in Japan, so I haven't played that one, obviously, but very much enjoying this. It is incredibly Japanese in nature. The game is just subtitled. There's no voice acting that's been turned to US, or to English voices, I should say. But it has, a lot of options, a lot of decision making throughout the game. You have to really think on your toes whenever there's aftershocks from the earthquake. There's some really zany events that happen in this game. And I think it's interesting that NIS decided to bring this out here. It does support the VR. I don't have the VR headset, so maybe somebody else could weigh in and let me know how that is. There's also a Switch version of this, but I've heard it's not as stable as the PS4 version. So I was going to let you guys know the vendor I found that still had new copies at retail price, so I didn't have to overpay for it. But I checked right before I made this video, and it's sold out there now as well. So very difficult to find game. I don't know if NIS is going to reprint it, but I do think that this one's well worth playing if you're looking for something very different on your PS4. Alright, that is all the PlayStation stuff. We're going to move on to some Neo Geo releases. And I did get one more game for my Neo Geo Pocket Color set that I'm sort of going for. I'm getting about maybe 2/3 of the way there now. And that is Puyo Pop. This is actually one of the more difficult games to find on the system. And I was very happy to get a nice, very clean copy, complete copy of this. This one is a series that I've always liked. It's based on, obviously, the Puyo Puyo series. And I think that overall it plays well on the Neo Geo Pocket Color, but it is a little difficult to discern the different colors. So I put some hours into this month, but I think that it's not the best in the series, but it's passable if you're looking for some puzzle action on the system. So very happy to have another game towards my set on that, and one of the more difficult ones to find that took me some digging to get. Also got some Neo Geo CD games this month, and as this has been a system I've been focused on kind of all year long, I'm really getting down to the last few titles that I'm still looking for. So kind of happy to get all three of the games I'm going to show here. The first one is Magician Lord. This was a very early release on the Neo Geo AES and MVS, and ultimately it was one of the Neo Geo CD games that came out with some enhanced music very early in the life of the Neo Geo CD. If you have not played this game for 1990 when this came out, it would have been a just game changer with bigger distribution. I think that the graphics and color in this game is really a cut above what was out even in arcades in 1990. That said, though, the game is tough as nails. It is some very unforgiving jumps and deaths and things like that occur. Just to give you an example, if you happen to fall into a lava pit, when you respawn, you end up right in the middle of the lava pit again, immediately taking damage. So it has some things that could be considered a little questionable as far as their fairness, but can't fault the design of the game as far as how it looks and the characters and some of the flexibility they had with different power-ups and things like that in the game. So very happy to have that one in my Neo Geo CD set. The next one is one that I had to wait approximately 2.5 months to get, and that is Robo Army. This is an interesting beat-em-up that came out also pretty early in the Neo Geo arcade life, and then was brought to the Neo Geo CD when that system launched later on. Very big sprites in this game, nice colorful action. I think that it plays very smoothly. Probably not the best beat-em-up on the system, but definitely up in the top tier. I would put this above like Mutation Nation if you've ever played that one. The reason this one took so long is I ordered this from Japan probably the first week of April, and it was sent through Japan airmail, so the seller dropped it off at the post office in Japan, and then immediately after that, Japan Air stopped dispatching packages to the United States for several months. So this game got stuck in extreme limbo. I guess out of the blue, Japan Air is now functioning again to the United States, because this just landed on my doorstep last week, and that is a complete surprise. I'd actually stopped checking the tracking because it hadn't moved anywhere in months. So maybe it's time to start buying games from Japan again. I think this was the last one that I ordered because of the COVID pause, and we'll see where it goes from there. The last one I got was also a recent thing to land in my mail. This is one of the very difficult ones to find for the Neo Geo CD. It's Overtop, and it's the third of the overhead racing games for the system. This does have some very nice CG graphics in the intro, which is pretty amazing for the hardware as far as how they put that together. It's very colorful, a lot of different cars and vehicles to choose for this game. I think it's interesting that because there's a variety of tracks that you have to race through all the different types of landscapes and obstacles, sometimes the best car in this game could be something like a Kia Sportage versus the Lamborghini Diablo. I know that sounds crazy, but it just really helps more with the different terrain and things like that in the game. Of the 3 overhead racing games, I would probably put this a little behind Neo Drift Out, but it is very fun to play, and I'm going to dig into this one quite a bit more. This one has taken me a long time to find at a price that isn't completely insane, but I would say still this was one of the top shelf games that I got for the month overall. Another game I got for the Sega Genesis was a great upgrade. This is a game that I've owned loose for many, many years, and found a seller in Europe that had a great price on this complete in the box. This is a very clean copy of Splatterhouse 2 for the Genesis, a game that I've always really liked, and very happy to have a nice complete copy of this now. One thing I've noticed, and maybe if I have European followers watching this video, you can comment on this, but it seems like this game did not get a PAL release, and I'm guessing back in the 90s that this was a popular import for European gamers to bring over from the United States. There seems to be more of these in complete condition on the market on by European sellers on eBay that I'm seeing in the United States, and maybe due to that, the prices are actually quite a bit lower. So even if you factor in shipping and waiting maybe up to a month to get it, you can get a pretty good deal on this game if you buy from a European seller. So very happy to have this, and a nice little learning experience of what I went through with that one. I did get one Xbox game. This is kind of just a build on my Tony Hawk comments, but I was told that the Xbox version, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2X, is the superior version of this game, and this is the one I need to own in my collection. So after I bought that PS1 version and hearing that, I decided to grab this one as well. I haven't popped this one in yet to compare it, but I would expect that, you know, this one being a very late version and the most upgraded hardware that Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 came out on, it probably is the best in the series. So we will test that out very shortly and maybe give a report back on how that went. One last system I got some games for this month is the system that I hardly ever buy games for. So it was very strange that I bought 3 games for the system this month, and we'll go ahead and go through those. The first one of these is a game that I'm kind of ashamed to say I had never played up until 2 days ago, and that is Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. For some reason, I was a huge fan of Ocarina of Time when the N64 was new, so I bought that game as soon as it came out. I did really enjoy it. I beat it back then, 20 plus years ago, but when Majora's Mask came out shortly after, I just couldn't care at all. There was something about the character design and what I saw in screenshots and magazines and things like that that turned me off. But now that I've sat down just with fresh eyes, you know, this game's 20 years old now, I haven't played the remakes or anything like that, it's a pretty interesting detour from the traditional Zelda game. I did put some hours into it the other night. I do think there's some pretty wacky stuff going on here you wouldn't typically associate with a Zelda game, but I do think it's a welcome addition to my library. So I will be hanging on to this one. I actually got very lucky with this. This is a nice, clean, complete in the box copy. It's not the collector's edition version or whatever that came out first, but it's a second print that's a very nice shape. And the store that sold this sold it to me for the loose cartridge price. So I got a very nice deal on this to have it nice, complete in the box copy. A couple other games I got on the N64. This is a game that I've been curious about for a long time. This one is Rocket Robot on Wheels, and it comes in this nice red cartridge. This one's kind of notable. It's the first game by the company Sucker Punch that ultimately went on to make the Sly Cooper series. I really haven't got that into this. I put a couple hours into this one as well. It just really seems like a collect-a-thon. You're just constantly backtracking and trying to collect stars and objects and pieces, and it just gets a little bit beyond what I'm into for that. So if you're into collecting just non-stop things, maybe you would be interested in this game. Ultimately, I'm just like, let's get on with the gameplay. What else does this game have to offer? But maybe I'm not giving it a fair enough shake. I might go back and play it some more. Seems like there is some people that are pretty interested in this game now, so thought it would be interesting to get. The other one I am thoroughly enjoying that for some reason I waited a long time to get this game is the original Mystical Ninja starring Goemon game that came out for the N64. I've had the second one, which is Goemon's Great Adventure, for many, many years, and always enjoyed that one. This one's a little bit different. The second game is like a 2.5D. This one is more of a full 3D experience. But overall, the gameplay is very good. The stages are much larger than I expected, and I think that it's a welcome addition to the Goemon series, which we hardly ever get games of in the United States. So maybe a little bit of Jimmy Hoppa exposure for me. You know, he's made a lot of videos about his fandom of this series, and I think that it's rubbed off a little bit because now I'm wanting to chase down some more games in the series. So if you haven't checked out his videos, I highly recommend it. He's made a lot of just interesting stuff about the series, and especially all the games in Japan that we never got here. Would like to have that one complete, but it's getting very expensive, so I was happy at least just to get a loose copy for now. Alright, so we're getting down towards the end. I did promise some new hardware to show this month, so I have got 2 new portable older consoles to show you guys. First one of these is another Neo Geo Pocket Color, and it is the slim Japanese final version of the system, just like my other one is. My other Neo Geo Pocket Color is like a clear blue, and then this is like the clear crystal version of the hardware. I did find this at a store in the state. I was actually really surprised it was the Japanese version of the system. You know, there weren't a whole lot of these imported back then. I was very excited to get it in a unique color, and then unfortunately the store did not have any games or any way for me to test it in the store. I get it home and I find out the screen actually has some issues on this one. It displays the game just fine. There's no like dead pixels or anything like that, but the screen is very dim and there's something wrong with it because I can compare it directly to my other slim system and the screen is much brighter. Even under direct light, you can't see the screen very well. So what that does is it gives me an opportunity. I could either drive back out there and return it, or I'm probably going to do option B, which is put in the new backlit LCD mod that is available for these systems. So I never wanted to tear into my first one because it has the original box and everything. This one I'm not as attached to, but I do like the slim form factor, so I think I will be ordering the mod and maybe make a video on that if it works out well. So very happy to have that in the collection, even though it was kind of a mixed bag. The other thing I got is a system that I've always kind of looked at from afar. I never was even interested in this when it first came out. I didn't understand the point of it. But that is the Game Boy Micro. And this is the Famicom colored version that we even got in the US. I'm not really sure why, because there wasn't any affinity for the gold and red, but I love it. I think the color scheme on this is great. Why I'm showing the screen on this is I just think this system has a fantastic looking display. It is incredibly small, but it does have the enhanced backlit screen that the last generation GBA SP had. So very similar technology. The form factor on this is absolutely tiny. And to give you an idea of scale, I wish I'd brought it in with me, but the whole body of this system will fit on just the screen of a Sony PSP. Like, it's that small. I didn't think I would play this that much, but ultimately this has been like wandering around the house and in the yard with me, and I've been pulling it out at random times and playing it. So maybe that's the best reason to have a Game Boy Micro, is this is probably one of the most truly portable systems out there. And I think that overall I'm very happy to have this in my collection. I'm sure I'll be hanging on to it now. So the last stuff I have is just some boxes and manuals, and then we'll wrap it up. If you saw my last video, I did pick up a box and cartridge for this N64 game, which is Space Station Silicon Valley. Really enjoyed the game, and so I decided to go ahead and track down the manual. I found somebody just selling this, and so now I have a nice complete copy of that. Very happy to finish that one off. And then the other thing I found at another local store, which was pretty surprising, was some complete-in-a-box NES games at cartridge-only prices as well. The first one of these is not that exciting, but it is in really nice shape, and that is Championship Bowling. Believe it or not, this is the only bowling game that we got in the NES in the US. It's kind of surprising considering how large the library is, but nice complete copy of that. This one also supports the 4-player adapter, just a little trivia there. And then the last two are much more interesting. So these are two NES boxes that surprisingly I did not have in my collection, and that is for the original Contra. This one's in pretty decent shape. It did have the manual and the inserts with it. And then the other one was in better shape, and that is the Super C, so the sequel to that, Super Contra. I'm very happy to have both of those. I wish I also had a box for Contra Force, but that may be wishful thinking at the prices that one's going for. So that about does it. Very happy to get, all the stuff I got picked up this month. Thank you guys for watching. Please take a moment, let me know what you think, and I will talk to you soon. Have a great day or night, wherever you are.